Alright, I should be able to start here at some point. Am I starting yet? I don't even know what's happening. This is madness. It's getting crazy. Alright. Hey, it's me. Alright, should be able to start here at some point. Okay, am I starting yet? I'm going to start looking through these questions. I'll say them out loud, and then we'll go from there, okay? What do we got? Where are we at? Okay, I scrolled back into the actual world of talking about Ableton, whatever. Okay, I think we are almost there. Does anyone have questions? Fire extinguisher, yeah, all right. Okay, someone give me questions. There's no questions in the chat yet. Give me questions in the chat. I'll start talking through some of the ones on Facebook real quick. Will this page be available? I'm going to go ahead and upload this QA. I'll edit it into something palatable and upload it to a recording, yes. Question, do you ever use MP3 pads as tracks in Ableton? Do you just use your keys? This is kind of what I was talking about, where I'm thinking about doing the funny sounds as MP3 tracks, kind of, or waves or whatever, where it's interesting reverse sounds or reverse kind of vocal patches and vocal tracks, etc., etc. So I am pondering doing that, but for the most part right now I just use keys. Next question, what do you recommend for bands that don't have MDs? We play to clicks and tracks that are fired by the drummer. Sometimes transitions are automated in Ableton. It might be difficult and clunky with key changes. I like the idea of refraining a chorus after a crash out. Our senior pastor is asking us to create more moments. I think it'd be a good start. To be honest, with Jesus Culture, at church we use an MD, but we don't use MDs on the road. We don't use MDs on the road. And before I answer this question, FYI, the chat kind of disappears after a little while. I think it holds like 50 messages. So if I miss your question, just ask it again. So Jesus Culture doesn't use MDs on the road. We actually just kind of feel it out. And that's kind of what I was talking about. So what I recommend is having one or two people who are kind of in charge of looking over the transition or who take ownership of it. And I recommend you opening that dialogue I was talking about, where you talk and come up with a consensus and go through that feedback loop. I think that you don't always need to have the MD. The MD is nice because you can kind of, everyone gets on the same page when someone's speaking in their ear. But I think that there's a real potential to bring who you are without MDs, and I think that's a good thing. So I think just go for it. Again, that thing where I was talking about, create a plan that gives you a safety net that allows you to try some stuff. I bet this is really loud. I have a fan going in here. Hang on one second. But create a safety net that allows you to try a thing and just try one piece at a time. Don't dive headfirst into tons of moments. Find a song, like it might be, even if it's just, Here I Am to Worship or Heart of Worship or something, and you just plan on jiving on a down chorus or create a plan like let's float right here and see what happens. Then it'll get more natural after that. I'm going to turn this fan off because I'm sure it's super loud in this mic. Yeah, so I'm in this, I don't even know if this is working. I hope this is still working. Are we going? So I'm in this new office space that right now is just a shell. It's just a shell. There's nothing else happening, basically. And so it's all echoey and interesting, and I have a fan going because it's drying out something and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Glad you spoke on leadership. Thanks. Appreciate that. Am I missing the QA? That's going to be a commonly asked question. If this is an FAQ, that'll be the most frequently asked question. My biggest challenge is on the tech side. I've followed Transform Your Life Rig. I often find that I have 3 or more knobs and sliders I need to move between songs. Do you ever use automation to jump to new settings when you launch a clip? Do you manually turn all the dials? Rob, that's a good question. I do a lot of that kind of stuff on the fly, and this is where you can get strategic. I would have a hunch that the question is, when you have a bunch of faders set up and there are a bunch of knobs, like I do. If you've seen that Livid DS1, it's crazy. It has what, 8, 5, 40 some odd knobs, like 40, 50 knobs, and a bunch of faders. And the question is basically, what in between songs, Is it something in between songs? Are you actually like jumping around, or do you ever automate that? I have this weird aversion to automation in the sense of some of it's good. There's a channel I'll have to show everyone at some point that I have that I can push a button and it'll automatically pull from a certain patch based upon the section of the song, basically. So it's really weird, but I can at any given time pull up the right patch. It's and it's not switching patches, it's just pulling up the right patch. So I do some automated tricks, but in general, I don't like my computer telling me what I'm doing. I like me telling my computer what I'm doing. A little bit of ego, maybe. So so I don't normally do that, but I find that when people have a problem with knobs and faders, either they need to practice a little more to get the chops down, or have a couple thoughtful things set up, like a pad in your second channel or a pad on a different fader, so you have a couple different options. And you can kind of plan ahead, like I was saying. So if you're going from pad to piano, your piano's down, and as you end, you can sweep the pad out at the same time. Sometimes it's like turn the knob, move use your pinky and your whatever. For sure, there's some problems, but I find that there's some creative solutions. You just got to think about rerouting a few things, or I guess my recommendation for you would be to write down specifically what the problem was. Like, we ended a song on this, I needed to go to this, and what ended up happening was this, and then you can reroute, create new patches, and kind of take the bull by the horns, right? Would I consider a price for whole teams to watch the recording? And Annalie, just hit me up. Is that how you say your name, Annalie? I think that's how you'd say it. Just hit me up if you want to. I do offer discounts for whole teams to watch it and everything, and I can do it great. Yeah, I give a good deal for that. So just hit me up via email. It's fine. Do you have any tips for a worship team that doesn't quite as much tech on stage for transitions? This is Elsa. I actually think that people who don't have a lot of tech on stage end up having a better time of jamming and trying things. It's often the tech that actually fools people up, right? So as far as transitions, if this question is about transitions, I think you have it better because it's way more feely, way more flowy, way more natural. Just try X, Y, or Z, and you can pull some stuff off. It's almost always a problem of tech getting in the way, needing to do transitions, patch changes, tempo, tap tempo, move guitar channels, move around. Like, that's almost always the issue, right? And as far as tips for worship teams that don't have as much tech on stage, just in general, I think you can get certain people with the click in their ear. So like, get one or two in-ears going, or just the drummer even. You can take a line from the board and run it to a little Behringer mixer and then run a click into it. That works well. You can start branching out from musicians on to other musicians have it. We did drums, then keys, then guitars, and then leaders was our progression of who got kind of in-ears and stuff like that. So I think, but as far as transitions go, just feel it out and have plans for when the next. A lot of the times that's going to be an eyeball cue, right? Like, the leader's going to look back. So if I were playing with wedges, God help me, I haven't done that in so long. And if I didn't have a lot of tech on stage and wasn't able to move through it, I think what I would do is I would be just kind of holding down the fort at the end of a song and just waiting for the drummer. And in that case, it's not me, right? I'd give control of any tracks to whoever has in-ears. And I would just have loops, or I would, looped pads would be the only kind of tracks I would have. And it would be between the leader and the drummer probably when to start songs. Or in many cases, that ends up being the leader who looks back and says, go for it, right? And you'll have to kind of plan it out and feel it out. But a lot of it's not necessarily different. Someone has to lead, someone has to keep rhythm, whether it's the click or not, or you. You just kind of work it out, I guess. Thanks for all the compliments, guys. You guys are so kind. Jesus Culture, how free and so David says, at Jesus Culture, how free and open-ended are your arrangements? I always thought you guys moved freely with the Spirit. I'm getting the sense you actually work out the arrangements in advance. David, we do a little bit of everything. Jesus Culture, you'll find through our history, we have done perfect polished arrangements, and we have done completely zero arrangements, and we have spanned the gamut in between. Right now, I think that we bridge the gap between those two worlds, the freely flowing and the arranged. All of us are pretty savvy producers. Almost the whole band could produce a pretty killer record. And so because of that, we have a really we have an eye towards arrangements and parts and things like that. So we do work out arrangements in advance, and so how this typically works on a practical level is, and again, it's different when you're doing your own songs, right? Like, so people ask this, like, you guys seriously play the same parts every time? And it's like, well, I wrote it. It's my part. So I love that part. I came up with that part, and I wrote that part, so I want to play that part. So there's a lot of times that it's, we're playing the parts that we came up with, and we come up with arrangements based upon how we feel the song will best impact the room, best impact people, allow for a thing. And so we try to create arrangements that move and are kind of in that vein. And so what ends up happening, hang on one second. What ends up happening is we have a lot of both, and so we end up doing the arrangement, and then we make sure to leave room to get out of it. If you follow any of my teachings on Ableton, my kind of about tracks and stuff like that, what ends up happening is I can move around the arrangement pretty easily, and I can do songs that have arrangements and choruses and parts and tracks and tambourines and go to any section of any song. And so a lot of times the leader, Kim, might cue like verse 2 again or bridge, and so it's almost like there's a roadmap, and that roadmap gets stuck on unless we veer away from it, right? And at any given moment, we could veer away from it. So let's say we do both. And you're going to find that with a lot of this stuff where there seems to be polarizing, like you do arrangements, you don't do arrangements. The Spirit moves, the Spirit does. However you want to look at it, like where there's these polarizing things, we seem to fit right in the middle and just kind of hold on tight to both, right? Like we really like both. All right, I think I bumped through the Facebook one, so I'm just now getting over to the chat over here. Sorry. Let's see, up at the top. Fire extinguisher, I still love that. Okay. Does anybody here like guacamole? That's a wonderful question. I'm allergic to avocado, actually. Hang in there, drink some coffee. Absolutely. Anyone else out there use tracks? Are we doing like a... okay, so anyone else out there to use tracks? I always thought it was a bad thing, like cheating. Something churches do when they're just getting started, don't have the technical skills. We do tracks. Jesus Culture does tracks. Bethel does tracks. Hillsong does tracks. All sorts of stuff people do tracks. And I will say that there is an approach you can use on tracks that ends up with a spontaneous and ability, the ability to do whatever you want. Tracks can be something that empower you, just like your live rig. I think this is the gap. And a lot of you are part of the Hillsong Omnisphere worship group, right? Worship Sounds or Omnisphere worship. I don't know what they're called these days, but there's a Facebook group with like 1,000,000,000 people and whatever. They all like Omnisphere, and for whatever reason. Anyway, I asked a question recently. Said, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to tech and worship? I was a little bit shocked. I knew that people were frustrated at the limitations of tech. That's why I've done some of these classes, like Transform Your Live Rig and A to Z Live Tracks, are very much around empowering people with tech. It's something that I'm passionate about. But I was very shocked at the amount of people who said, I miss, basically a paraphrase would be, I miss the good old days when we didn't have all this tech and we could just enjoy music and enjoy worship. And it really struck home. I think that tech, there's a love-hate relationship with tech, and there is a way to use Ableton like an instrument. It's why I like Ableton. It feels like an instrument when you know how to use it. You're able to work it like an instrument. Its effects are like guitar pedals. Like you can do stuff with it that's different. And it's why I focus so hard on synthesis and sound design and the approach, because if you learn how to use these things really, really well, and you learn the theory behind it, and you start assigning knobs and live controls, tracks, everything from tracks and computer tech and audio and sounds and whatever ends up feeling really natural. So the point is, there is a way to use stuff. Do you guys, I don't know how many of you have heard of IHOP, the International House of Prayer, not pancakes, but in Kansas City, the big prayer movement. They have a 24-hour house of prayer and worship where there's always worship happening 24/7. No matter what, you go in the worship room, worship happening. They were the original, the OG 24/7 worship movement. And they, I remember seeing them before everyone synced up to click. There was a guy using Ableton on stage, tempoing in tambourine loops and different loops and percussion stuff. And there was like an Ableton guy. Like he just sat there and he'd like dance around and just tap tempo in things and fire loops. And they didn't have they have way less arrangements than we do. Like their arrangements are like, like especially back then, it was just like right in the middle of all the madness where, no one even thought about arrangements. It was just like, let's get up and jam, bro. All right, and keep moving. Everyone pray and see what happens. Wonderful. What's the longest silence you've had on stage? That's a wonderful question. Well, I guess I say that like I have a profound answer, and I don't. The longest we've had on stage, there's been moments that we let. It's very rare that silence lasts, right? Like when you go silent on a stage, it either is awkward or it's reverent. And if it's reverent, usually 9 times out of 10, someone's going to start singing or praying, or the crowd's going to start praying or singing the song, or someone's going to start prophesying in tongues or something crazy. And so usually there's not a lot of silence in our events from that regard. There has been literally, I will say that we have dipped down to nothing, silent. It was reverence. There was a moment in the room. It felt like weighty, like I'm not touching. It was actually one of the only times I disobeyed a leader. And I mean, in our context, disobeying a leader is hysterical. Like it's not how our team works. Like there's not an iron fist of you shall do this. So we ended up basically. We ended up essentially. Chris turned around and looked at me and said, "Let's go to the next song." I was like, "I ain't touching a thing." Like he could feel it was just like heavy. You wanted to fall over, and I just shook my head no. Like, nope. You start the next song if you want to. And he knew what I was saying. Like I said that. I went, "Go for it," and I did that. I went, "Go for it," and he started, and he chuckled and laughed, and looked at me and laughed, said, "Okay," and he knew my point, but and it was reverent, and the crowd started singing, and it literally lasted for 25 or 30 minutes of no music, just people worshiping, and we didn't do anything. We all just had our hands raised, singing along, worshiping, and just seeing where this moment was going to go. It was absolutely fantastic. It's similar. A different example is the Chicago moment that we talk about a lot, where 12,000 people, we stopped singing, they were cheering, or we stopped playing, they were cheering at the end of a song and didn't stop for 20 minutes, literally. Like, wow. And and we don't have like the hype guy on stage like, give it up. Like we don't have anything like that. So it was all just a thing. It was a moment. Okay, let's see. A lot of comments on tracks. Okay, I already answered about worship teams without tech on stage. I already answered MP3 tracks. User 4815 says one thing you can do to transition to tracks is to just get the drummer on in-ears and have him or her play to click. And that's essentially how we started. How Bethel started was Chris playing to click. Then I jumped in and started doing tracks once I got click going too. We did it all with Behringer boards at first. You don't need in-ears. You don't need wireless. You don't need anything. You can you yourself, most of you, if you have a monitor console, and depending upon how your setup is, if it's not powered, if you're not running power amps, like if the line itself doesn't have power, you yourself could buy the cabling to run for less than $150 to run in-ears, right? Like you get a Behringer, you get Behringer, you get an XLR cable, and you split off from your DIs for your keys, and now you have yourself a key send. You can do that in stereo. If you don't have stereo, that might make you happy, and you can mix in the mix manually. That's what I did for a very long time. Was I just had a send from the board, and it ran into a Behringer console, and I ran my keys a split from the DI so that I could turn them up and down according to my will. And to my will, bend to my dance puppets. And so anyway, that's kind of the deal. It's a great way to introduce. Hey Ian, how do you rewire your click track? Who controls and modifies the BPN for the whole band? Okay, so we're not that synced up. Jesus Culture, for all our tech and all our lights and our flashy things and all of my madness with syncing up Ableton, none of us sync up. So we all run our own dang click track and our own tempos. So Jeffrey has presets on his pedal board, and he asks me during sound check or whenever and says, "Hey, what's the tempo to the song?" And I answer him. The tempo to this song is 78 BPM, and so he does it all by himself. So rewire my click track. You don't. If you rewire, then if you're actually talking about rewire, then like Reason and Ableton are automatically synced based upon the master, right? There's the first program you open is called the master. The second is the slave. The slaves to the MIDI clock. just like sync. Will Doggett has a bunch of tutorials on how to sync up computers across the stage. None of us do any of that. I find that to be a complete headache and a complete curveball that you just really don't need. Feel free. I don't care. I will not bash anyone who does it, and probably there are a bunch of you who pull it off brilliantly. But man, that's not going to be me. We're gonna our world will like fall off. Our entire band will just start. Everything on our stage will catch on fire. Right. Okay. Low pass filter. Yeah. So I missed the original question that Tiffany asked, but talking about low pass filters. Yeah, it's low pass filter is a great way to get into synthesis. I talk about this a lot. I would you might want to check out my other. This isn't like a sales pitch, but I have a workshop called Transform Your Live Rig, and it's all about using a few specific effects live in order to have a really super flexible and super versatile, interesting rig that's fun to play, in my opinion. Do you schedule an MD for Sunday mornings at JC Sacramento, or is their band more flowy, etc.? User 7727. I actually don't attend church at JC Sacramento, believe it or not. I work with their team a little bit. I'm at Bethel. But I do know what they do. And they do a little bit of both. Jeffrey Cundy is the MD there, and so almost every time he leads, there's a mic, and I think there's a mic set up when he's not playing, every time he plays a lead, that is. There's a mic set up somewhere around, but we try to do a blend of both. Even when we use an MD mic, like if you notice, I bash on MD mics, and it's not like a real thing. I don't look down on churches who use MD mics or anything like that at all. I just think that there's some real blind spots to them and some real potential for overlooking what you're missing with them. You would never know what you're missing, I guess, and so I'm keenly aware of that. But even when we do, so you'll see we have MD mics and whatever on stage at Jesus Culture events all the time. And even when we do and when the church does, we're fairly light on them. It's like, let's go to the 4. Like, so if there's a moment that someone needs to cue, like someone's going to call it, well, we have a mic just in case. Or if there's something weird happening or Chris turns around and tells me a new song, I'll say something. So no matter what, our MD mics are pretty low tech, I guess. Let's see. How you use tracks. Pretty tech heavy. We haven't used tracks yet. Yes, I can go a little bit in detail on how we use tracks. The question is, can you go into detail on how you use tracks? I'm not going to tell you my exact method because it'll take forever, but the idea is we set up tracks in such a way that our approach has been varying, and we're moving more towards where my belief, and we haven't done this at every event, so if you've seen us and you're like, that's not what they do, fine. But we're moving towards the idea that if it's in a track, it should be believable. It should either A, add enough that it needs to be there, like if a tambourine is the only thing that makes a chorus pick up and you don't have a perk player, fine, put it in the track. Or it's so subtle that no one will be looking for it, sub-bass, maybe a pad layer in a chorus, something like that. Or it needs to be believable in the sense of people need to be able to see it. I'm not a big fan of like entire intros and entire song sections, someone looking up and looking for the part and going, I don't know, where to go. Like, I'm not a fan of what I call EDM DJing worship, right? Like it's not that and this is not a bash on anyone. Man, it's so easy to construe what I say as bashes. I love so many of these people who are doing this. It's just in my world and in Jesus Culture's world, we're trying to keep this kind of feeling. We want to keep the feeling of a 5-piece band alive while adding all the tech in. So our tracks are pretty heavy and there's a lot going on, but we don't super rely on them. So on one song, it might be a part that's not feasible to play live, like the Dulcimer intro of Sing Out. Like, you're never gonna be like bong, bing, bing, bing. You're never gonna quite get there. And so we'll use something like that potentially when we're playing and have a couple synths and a couple things. And so there's some layers we'll add in. And then there will be a song that we don't have tracks at all. But regardless, the way I split tracks up and the way I work Ableton means that no matter where we want to go, I can switch to any section of a song at any given time. And it doesn't slave me to my computer. I have a unique way of splitting all this stuff up and doing all of this that it ends up that it's really easy to not have to work the computer in tracks land while adding a bunch of stuff. I will say that our front of house guy covers a multitude of sins as far as on the songs that we don't have sub bass. There are little tricks you can do. Like, here's a freebie. You take the bass channel if you have a digital console. So you said you're tech heavy. This is, again, user 8884. Said you're tech heavy, so you probably have a digital console or something. If you do, you could split the bass channel into a separate parallel bass channel, low pass it at 100, not even, low pass it to where all that's coming through is low end, compress and or distort the living tar out of it, and all of a sudden what you have is sub bass channel. So this is what our sound guy will do on the low moments, and there's tricks for all of this stuff, turning the guitars from mono to stereo, turning my keys going from, he'll pan off things and mess with stuff to be able to fill this mix out when there aren't tracks. Do I use Follow by Isotonic? No, I do not. It is a great program. I do not do things that way. That is not how my set works. I have a less computer-intensive version than what Follow does. Use cue tracks or cues for every song you play? Nope, not every song. We use tracks on songs that make sense on, and sometimes we go into without it. We never have tracks on songs like Set a Fire or anything like that. We just play them. It's song to song, depends. External gear with your keys rig. I'd love to use external gear with my keys rig. Big Sky's great. Timeline's great. I love it. It's a lot of fun. No, I've been using Ableton's built-in effects. Lee Brown's from iHop, fantastic. Or where I learned. iHop's amazing. Account for transition options in the possible event of a song getting spontaneously dropped from the set. That's a good question. That's a very good question. And do I account for transition options in the possible event of a song being dropped? I don't. That ends up down that path lies madness. So I never... If a song's going to get dropped from a set in our world, typically that means that there's something spontaneous or interesting happening anyway, or the room feels different, and so a little bit of silence doesn't really matter. There's some chatter happening. There's some whatever. Most of our songs don't have any crazy, weird difference in intros anyway, so it doesn't end up being a problem. But no, I think if you go too far, I don't even know how you would make that note. Like you have like an if-then web of, madness that my brain couldn't compute that. Yes, MD is a music director, and yes, sometimes different than a worship leader. The idea is we can't expect the good side of it looks like this. Let me tell you both ends. Music director has a talkback mic that's only in in-ears and can tell people start the song, stop the song, play this chord, end on the one, let's intro this, go here. And I've heard MDs that do every single part of a song, every single part of a recording, like every, chorus, 2, 3, go. Verse 2, go now, and the good side, the argument for them, is very simply that one guy can talk, and you're not relying upon the skills of volunteers to be able to get you through the set and feel polished. So you can up the relative skill level and savviness of an entire team pretty quickly because it's like go ahead and fade the pad in. Great, awesome, that sounds really nice. Now let's go ahead and start the song. Go ahead. Like the MD can kind of direct how things go, so you're not relying on the savviness of people who sometimes you can't really expect to get super good at this stuff. The dark side of it, that's the good side. It brings people up, makes people mesh really, really well. The dark side is that the worship leader ends up relying on their MD to create space and to be savvy. And if the MD has a bad day, what happens? If the MD isn't on the same page, I have been a part, again, with prominent worship teams. Names you would know, names you would get giddy about, talking to or whatever. Like they're celebrity status people who have wanted to go to a certain place, and the MD ended up killing the moment. I've been a part of a team when that happens multiple times, and so that's why I bring this up. It's not because I'm against them. Every team I'm a part of, every team I've been a part of, ends up having a mic on stage to talk to ears. That always happens. I'm skeptical about their role as authoritarian, do what I say on the team. I'm skeptical about the potential oversights and potential assumptions that come along with that. I'm not against them at all. I just like bringing up, since everyone's so into them and it's just blindly accepted, I like to bring up the dark side. Ableton in arrangement view. There are ways to do it. I'm not a huge fan. I feel like Ableton in arrangement view, you can end up with something weird happening. It might just be that I don't understand it. I'm fine with saying that. Will Doggett's way into it, the multi-tracks guru. He has a lot of great stuff on Arrangement View in Ableton. I use Session View. How do you have your rig set up to be able to switch from one patch to another in Ableton, like in MainStage? I don't switch like in MainStage. My setup is buttons that I have external instrument stuff. I talk about this in depth in Transform Your Live Rig. I have buttons set up that end up pulling in patches and letting me layer at will. So when I have, let's say, 16 patches with 16 buttons, those 16 patches, I can say piano, and I say I want a piano, a CP80, a synth, and a bell. I go bing, 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 and they're all there coming out of different bus channels I've created. This allows a really large amount of flexibility in what you can pull off, because if I do, like, say, I could do a piano, a synth, and an electric piano, and I could control the reverb and filter on each of them independently and create effects on each of them independently and change the mix independently. So you can create interesting layers and stuff. A lot of potential there. So it's using the external instrument plugin in Ableton. I've been recently experimenting with the idea of having one having one button be a setlist button, and it uses the instrument rack to go through sounds, because since it's external instruments, you can just activate it and deactivate it and look good. Never mind, that's going to get complicated. Chain selector, though. How do you have your... thoughts on time-constrained services and transitions? Yeah, we do that all the time. Bethel does that all the time. Jesus Culture does that all the time. This is, again, this is under... the question is, when you have a time-constrained service, 30 minutes, and you have to be in and out of worship or something, how do you do transitions, especially in the context of what I'm talking about with feely, interesting, cool stuff? When you're coming under leadership, and this is all part of, this is, again, the assumption is the pastors in, your lead pastors into it, your worship pastors into it, your worship leaders into it. With that assumption in mind, you allow in your set the possibility of something cool. So, sometimes a 30-minute set for us is only 3 songs. Sometimes a 30-minute set is only 4 songs, and if you divide that up, that's 8 minutes a song. Well, most songs are only 5. So there's room for it. So just create room to float around. And a lot of the times this looks like the first song has no flow after, the second song has a bit of flow, the third song can be as long as you want, and then there's song 4, 5, and 6 that you do based upon how the room feels. You can end up polishing it up. If you do that, and you're going to get flowy, one of the best things you can have in order to make that time frame, that wonderful counter staring you at the face, the countdown timer, is to have the worship leader have a song in their back pocket to go into spontaneously. And man, I'm giving away a trick here, right? This is a trick. Like I exalt thee, here I am to worship. Something that in their back pocket that they can just go in, sing a chorus for however long they want, and then end on time. We've done that a ton. Luke Hendrickson has this awesome super ethereal pad for Jesus We Love You. Have I seen the patch? I have not seen the patch. He does stuff with both Reason and Omnisphere. I don't know which one that is. I'm trying to remember Jesus We Love You. It might be Reason. I have the Reason session. I haven't really looked at it. He answers his stuff, though. If you get on Instagram or Facebook, he'll talk to you about it. So not the QA? I think I'm doing the QA. Did it die on me? No, it's going. There must be a joke here somewhere. Would you share or sell your timeline patches? I do not have so-called timeline or big sky patches, but I bet Jeffrey Cundy's are really good. Hi there. If you just got here and you're here, I'll send a recording out soon, tomorrow probably. Do I have hardware synthesizer sounds in live too, or just software sounds? I've sampled my Juno, and I use that a little bit live. Question is about hardware synths. I haven't gotten a ton into hardware synths live. Our sound check and travel schedule combined with what our crew looks like means our setup time and sound check time is pretty quick usually. And believe it or not, Jesus Culture rarely has rehearsal time, rarely has sound check time. We go in, we have 45 minutes to get a complete sound check of all of our channels, and that's, 16 drum channels or something. All of our channels, stereo guitars, 8 channels of keys, 3, 4 vocalists. We have 30, 40 minutes to get all of that and run one song and get a change. So we actually don't even rehearse all that much, and so no, I don't pack around hardware synths. It just adds to the complication, and I have a lot of fun. You can do so much with Ableton. I cannot tell you how much you can do with Ableton. All right. Chris Kenny, what's up, dude? How would you transition two songs that end and start with a subtle pad, but the key change is awkward, E to F? Thinking going into something like Holy Spirit. Well, what I would do is potentially turn it on its head. So let's say you end a song in E and it's just a pad, and you're supposed to fade in a pad in F for Holy Spirit. What I would do is, instead of doing that, I would plan the acoustic guitar, or if it's acoustic, playing the intro, or electric, depending upon which version you're doing. What I would end up kind of pulling off is this concept of, instead of needing that pad to fade and fade, I'd connect with that. So if it were Jeffrey, let's say, playing acoustic, that never happens, but pretend it is. I'd say, hey, instead of me fading in the next pad, I'm going to fade out as I start the next click, and just come in on the downbeat whenever it makes sense. And so I'd be sweeping out the pad on the E, you know, and then the picking part comes in. Or I'd fade out the pad and the acoustic would come in, and then I'd fade in. I think that rule of starting with a pad sometimes can be broken really easily and feel way better. The idea that we have this idea that somehow, and I know why the thinking's there, but it's like the song ends in E, so there's a chunk of pad E. And this song on the record, or when we've done it previously, has a chunk of pad to start it. And it makes sense to start with a pad sometimes. So how do I make these two fit together? And you see E and you see F, and you go, you try to, and it's like, how do I, you know? And it's not really a thing, I think, that has to be thought of that way. You can get outside the box and do something completely different. You could do a different texture, like I was talking about, if you had reverse, plan on having reverse interesting sounds, a different kind of texture, sparkles. There's a lot of different ways to change it up. I think it's not the end of the world, but if you end on settle pad 1 and you fade out and then you fade in settle pad 1 in a different key, that's not the best ideal situation. I'd get out of it, right? How much time do I spend planning out my parts for sets? With Jesus Culture, this is a non-issue, right? I wrote the parts during a recording, and I have them memorized. They're in my gut, and it just kind of happens. So I don't really spend a lot of time. If I forget a part, then I spend time. So in some cases, you could say 0, or you could look at it like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of rehearsals at some point in time. That being said, if I'm doing on a Sunday, I'm playing on a Sunday and someone sends a set list and I don't know the parts or I need to learn new parts, one of the things I'll end up doing is essentially creating parts based upon hooks. If you do that, you kind of need to have two options, right? Like if you're playing the hook, cool, but maybe the guitar player has a hook, so you need to have two options. Mostly, I just try to feel. There's this concept of feeling what chord forms feel great, right? Like root note, inversion 1, inversion 2, sus chord, minor 7, like the feeling of the chord, where the voicing works, that I think is the most important part to know on a new song. If you're talking about between sets, I don't spend a ton of time. I just kind of in my head know where I need to go. When arrangements are open-ended and you have tracks, how do you signal changes of direction without a train wreck? That's a great question. User 8862. So, question. So I talk about arrangements not having set entire times, like, entire things happening. Like the arrangements are open, and if you want to repeat the parts a bazillion times. Part of it is you're going to find so when you think about transitions and arrangements changing midstream, you think that's going to be madness and chaos, right? Because it's like, how do you know where anyone's going? 90% of the time, there's a feeling, right? And there's a thing that can happen, like repeat the last chorus, play the chorus down, go to the bridge. So part of it is usually we'll start by the worship leader leads the song and plans something. Sometimes we'll start with, Chris might be like, and I think I'll go back to the bridge here, or whatever. But if you're a singer with a mic, you can end up, using your hand signals, like verse 1, verse 2, chorus. If you're a leader, use your thumb for a chorus. If the thumb disappears, it's now a bridge. Bridge, chorus, 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 bridge, bridge. Because, when you're a leader, you're like, woo, woo, chorus, and your chorus it just kind of moves around. Chorus, bridge. Thumb means chorus. Anyway, you can lead the band through where you want to go. Chorus, down. Down, chorus, down, bridge, down, verse 2. There's stuff you can do with that kind of thing, right? And you can lead the band. If you're a guitar player, you need to kind of have an idea of where you're going, and then the spontaneous typically is going to happen after the fact. You get through the arrangement, and then you go somewhere. So like a leader with a guitar isn't going to be like magically somehow their foot, they jump in the air and their foot goes up and they whatever, but they might say in the mic, let's just sing that again, or or on, and so you go to the verse, on and on and on and on, whatever it is. You just kind of got creative with that, but the idea is we're not flying blind. And then as time goes on and you know how a song's supposed to go, like there's a feeling of, oh, when we're done with this part, we're going to go back to the bridge. That's how it works. Like it's going to be the thing. And sometimes that changes, but generally speaking, you use a combination of hand signals, and then as a consensus is made, the hand signals are a lot less necessary. Have I ever led worship as a keyboardist? I have not sang in a mic in so long. I used to sing. I have a couple albums, solo albums, and I did used to lead worship at youth group all the time. And I did nothing interesting. I just played pads or pianos, and I sang a lot of falsetto stuff with reverb. So I didn't do any of the tracks or stuff back then at all. Let's see. I remember the first time you guys came to Atlanta, you did an awesome transition. It was like a dubstep going from Awakening to the next song. I don't remember that at all. We did dubstep at the end of Awaken Me. That might have been a joke, and I might not ever remember that again. That sounds like, God, it just does not sound like us, but that's cool. Have I done any songwriting lately? Not a whole ton, a little bit. I wrote a little bit on the new Jesus Culture album, just a titch. I should get Jeffrey to do a guest masterclass. I really should. Will the QA be recorded? Absolutely. This will be sent out, this high-quality video from my 2012 MacBook Pro. A session arrangement. How do you get stems to flow from one another? Currently jump from a bridge to a big chorus sound wonky. How do you make that transition nicely? I go over my stuff in A to Z Live Tracks in Ableton. That's my main Ableton, how I chop up songs. However, in general, if you have a full band and your band is building, then that transition from bridge to big chorus shouldn't sound terribly wonky. It'll probably sound worse to your production ears or to your in-ears than it actually is, right? Like that kind of transition feels weird, but in the house it's not going to be that bad. So usually I just don't worry about it. But if the band leaves you hanging, that's their problem. So the band builds and you're fine. See you in Sacramento. Woo! Do I use MainStage? I don't ever touch MainStage with a 10-foot pole if I can avoid it. Here, I can do my MainStage rant for a minute. MainStage costs $30. That's fantastic. Great resource. I'm glad some people find it amazing. MainStage crashes like a $30 program for me. I've never had a setup with MainStage that hasn't done something totally weird that I didn't want it to do, and it takes me forever to figure out why. It has strange CPU settings that you really shouldn't need to turn on a program made for live. Like, what is it? It's like a weird resolution thing or something, or fader settings. I don't remember, like automatic feedback. Like, you shouldn't have something that kills your CPU. And I'm not a fan. I'm glad that it gives access to churches access to tech stuff that's a lot cheaper. I think that it is incredibly glitchy, so I don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I use Ableton to control Reason. All my patches come out of Reason. Ableton is kind of like the interface that the master interface and computer, around all of it. Amen to MainStage being wonky. What's my favorite new patch that I've discovered? I've actually been getting outside of that kind of world. Like, I'm going to have way fewer patches coming out in general, mostly because I'm getting to where I have one patch that works for everything. We did a song on the new Jesus Culture album that legitimately, I think I used the exact same starter patch, and it's just like tweaking a few things and how you pull it off in voicing, for bass, for pads, and for a lead. And all of a sudden it's like, I guess I don't need anything else. So I've been way into trying to create sounds and slightly modify filters, attacks, slightly modify decays to where they fit perfectly in a song and you don't need to layer anything. I only want layers to happen if the contrary motion work. And so there's been a lot, this new Jesus Culture album, you'll hear a lot of that. Could I create a class to show how I use Ableton? I have created a class. If you go to synthuniversity.teachable.com, and you'll get a login to Synth University with the recording of this class shortly, tomorrow probably. When you go there, you will see there's a class called A to Z Live Tracks in Ableton. That is my main Ableton course, and it is all about my approach to splitting up tracks and why it's different and how to keep low CPU usage, be spontaneous but have arrangements. And my method doesn't require you to mash buttons too much. It requires it's unique. It's simple and elegant and a no-brainer, but you'll see what I mean when you look at it. Great. Thoughts on Keyscape and Omnisphere? Look, here you go. Let's see if anyone can hear this. Let's see if anyone can hear past the hate, if you will. Like, everyone hears this, and whenever I talk about Omni and Keyscape and Spectrasonics and amazing programs, people hear me say something towards the idea of I'm a hater, and that's not the case. I think they're brilliant programs. How do I want to put this? Synths, okay, software synthesizers sound really good instinctively based upon math, whether you know it or not. Like the difference between, there's virtual analog synths and analog synths. And virtual analog synths are processing using math to come up with algorithms to emulate analog synths. Now, when it does that, you'll find there are many virtual analog synths that sound very different, right? Like the Roland ones don't sound nearly as good as, say, the Virus ones. That's not because the Roland synths suck. There's a reason the Roland synths are literally like a quarter of the price, and it's because the Virus synths are shoved full of CPUs. They have tons of processors. It's like a freaking huge computer in there. This is legitimate, so the math they're doing is way more profound and impactful. Omnisphere does some interesting stuff, and there is definitely some unique things that can be pulled off with it. However, what you sacrifice really heavily is knowing what happens with the CPU. Knowing and whatever. Like, there's some serious math going on in there, and you can get it sounding real good. I've also stumbled a bazillion times into, like, I'm playing a sound. It's amazing. I'm playing a sound. It's amazing. Computer caught on fire. Right? Like, it's another one of those situations. So I avoid VSTs in general, mostly because I think they're unpredictable. I don't like that. I don't like things that are weird. I have a setup with Ableton and Reason that has a bazillion patches, however many patches I want, runs our entire live rig. It's a 2012 MacBook Pro, not the top of the line one of the time, and it runs our entire rig with less than 35% CPU usage. That's seriously a pretty good feat. If you do this stuff a lot, you know that's a pretty huge feat. That's not that's not normal. When I play a piano in Reason, nothing really happens. Maybe a bump on the CPU. I play a piano in almost any other piece of software, and the CPU bumps up to 15 or 20. Right? Like, it really can be really draining on software. So Keyscape, hands down the best sounding piano software out there. Probably. I don't know. I haven't really compared all of them, but I would not be shocked about that. And I want it, and I will buy it. I don't own it at this moment, but I want it, and I will buy it, and I will use it on albums occasionally when it calls for it. And sometimes, and this is the same way I use some of the Contact instruments. I pulled out the Unicorda a couple times on the new Carrie Job album, and it just made sense, and that was the right sound, and fine, so I bounced out to it. But I'm not going to sit and roll through VSTs and just steamroll my computer, because it just takes away from the creative process for me. So, Omnisphere, Keyscape. Sound great. There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do with them. If I were working on the top-of-the-line Mac Pro all the time, potentially, sure, I might use it. If I could get them to do like a UAD thing, like if I could buy Omnisphere with it dedicated processing that guaranteed it never ever glitched no matter what you did, I'd be in. Well, no, actually, I don't care. I'm good enough at Reason that I don't know that I care about that anymore. But Omni sounds amazing. I don't have a problem with Omni. I have a problem with VSTs. I have a problem with the CPU usage, and I have a really hard time buying into how good it is. Let's see. Do you think it's possible to lead and run tracks spontaneously and play keys at the same time? That's what I'm looking at. Shannon, you are a saint. Lydia Hendrickson does a little bit of this at Bethel. She leads and does all of it. I think that's a little bit of a tall order in general, right? It's a little bit of a tall order in general. So, like, your ability to lead a band, to feel the room, to run tracks spontaneously, and play actual keys parts, that can be a little bit strange, right? That can be a little bit weird and a little bit hard to do all at once. I imagine it's possible. I mean, if you watch the guy from Muse, he's like playing full-on leads, dancing, and singing in falsetto, and I don't know, and looking cool. Like it's so it's definitely like possible, but I wouldn't completely recommend it. I'd offload something. Maybe get a guy or gal to run the track spontaneously for you, maybe something like that. Get a second keys player. That would be my preference. Let's see. You run at 512 buffer after being used to it. Does it mess up your timing? Yeah, sometimes. A lot of times I don't play pianos when I record them perfectly. I have to get back into playing them actually on time. I'm used to a buffer. But a lot of times you can just move it backwards and forwards, right? Hang on one second. I have someone blowing up my phone. And I really need to answer it. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So sometimes it is, but a lot of times the recording, that you can just push it backward with recordings. As far as analog stuff like synths, that kind of accuracy isn't even necessary half the time. Oh, is the Luke Hendrickson thing, did they... Bethel's been using my grain delay patch. I don't even know. Luke stole that from me on tour, the dog. He covered me on tour one time and stole my Ableton set. And now it's floating around. Does your Ableton take forever to load? 10 minutes to load? Okay, so mine doesn't take 10 minutes to load. Mine takes like 30 seconds max, maybe 15 seconds. It feels like forever sometimes. I would recommend having a master set that you make, just like that, all songs split into all sections. And, okay, this is where it gets a little bit weird. Potentially move them. Ready? I'm going to add this to A to Z Live Tracks to Ableton very soon. So if you have, let's say, four stems, pad, synths, keys 1, keys 2, keys 3, keys 4. You have 4 stems. Split those 4 stems up for one song on their own channels, in their own scenes. Now, directly diagonally below them. So if you have a square, diagonally below them, right here. Split up the next set of songs. So down scenes, over into new tracks. It's going to take way longer to open than what you were talking about. But when you set it up like that, you now have a master set that you can drag from the file browser those tracks in. So let's say you do 6 songs. You pull them in, and now they're on their own tracks. The scenes are split up perfectly. If you want to combine tracks, you just move the tracks over. Like you move them over into the main master tracks. I'll have to show this to you. This probably doesn't come off at all, but there's the start. Does your giant... Okay, transform... You were talking about Chris Kilala asking how you... I don't remember what we're even talking about. Sorry, I don't remember that. I was talking about Chris Kilala asking how I'd approach recreating a Coldplay pad. I don't remember, sorry. Yes, the Q&A will be sent out. I don't know which video in Synth University I go over that. I'd imagine it's one of the effects classes. There's an effects class on, let's see, reverb and delay. There's an effects class on reverb and delay, and it probably is in that one, I would imagine. Okay, I'm out of questions. I imagine there's a couple people wanting to join the group. I'm going to go check the Facebook group again and stay for just a minute. And if you want to ask a few more questions, I will answer them. Otherwise, 3 people want to join this group. Shannon, you found us anyway. Thank God. All right, let's see. Okay, so we're in the group. We're in the group. We're in the group. Okay, so yeah, if you have questions, keep asking them. I'm going to go real quick. I think my wife is waiting outside, which is very kind of her. I'll tell her she can come in. So ask more questions. I'll come back. And I'm back. There are no more questions, but I'm going to wait because I know there's like a bazillion second delay, so you get to look at my face. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Nothing? Nothing? Nothing more? So I use tremolos like I would in ARP. I think I understand the question. Yeah, you can use tremolos like a filter gate. Kind of. It's more like a filter gate than an ARP. An ARP is typically, although there are polyarpeggiators that do that kind of thing, but typically an ARP is a one-note deal. Can you open that so that doesn't do that? The strings on the end. So yeah, tremolos are kind of like a filter gate or a polyarp, and you can sync them if it's like a square wave. But I don't know, use tremolos for rhythm, sure. Advice? What would your advice be? Good night, Matthew. Thanks for hanging out. What would your advice be for someone who's getting our piano player ready to play with Ableton for first time? For first time. Let's see. What would my advice be? Let's see. I would not shove them completely off the deep end. I wouldn't throw them in the deep end. I'd let them. I'd put them into something that gives them, again, that you're looking for win-win scenarios, and you're looking for ways that people can win even if they fail. So, you know, plans to not have a plan to fail. What am I thinking of? Safety net. There you go. You're looking for a safety net. And so one of the things you can do is someone who's used to piano, having the keyboard or piano they're using, say if your church has a motif or something, just show them. They can plug in that and the computer, and they can turn the volume up and down on the motif and get the piano sound they want in case something goes haywire. So kind of start dipping them into it a little bit and dipping their feet in and kind of seeing where it goes. And then each week or each month or whatever, start gradually adding something to them or giving them a task to do in Ableton the next week. Like, hey, this week we want to run this set of tracks. Can you get that ready? And just make sure you're available to help them out. Am I only playing with Jesus Culture? Do I still play in Reading, for example, with Amanda or Stephanie? I have not been playing in Reading, although I attend church there and hang out with them a bit. I have not been playing up there. I might play a little bit with them soon on that. Mostly I just play with Jesus Culture, though. User 8884. Did you hear about the stupid keyboardist who kept banging his head against the keys? He was playing by ear. Fantastic. Jason, AZ, Jason says that does make sense, and he's talking about the weird setup I was talking about for a master set for Ableton. I don't talk about it in A to Z Live Tracks yet. I'm saying that that's going to be an addendum I add to it fairly soon because I think that's a key idea for people to have a master set that you can pull from, and then that's the one that takes forever to load, but you can pull from it. So we'll get there. Thanks for the kind words. Let's see. Patch that's perfect for everything. Honestly, it's just a poly saw. There's not a bunch going on. It's just it ended up working. I'll at some point in time I'll put it out once I think about it. I don't know. I know how you make it. Let's see. Will you be visiting Norway anytime soon? No, I might not. I might. No, I'm not. I don't. I've been trying to travel less out of the country than I have in the past. Mostly to hang out with my wonderful family. I traveled a lot the first couple years, the first 5-6 years of my marriage, and the first couple years of my son's life, and so I'm trying to chill out and stay stateside for a little bit. All right. If you're looking, I'm looking to invest in a new MacBook Pro to run Reason and Ableton. What should I look for in terms of specs? The only things that matter, I don't know. First, make sure you know what Apple's soldering in these days, because Apple, I don't know. They've been kind of evil lately. So, find out what they're soldering in. Does the RAM? Can you actually upgrade it later? So, if you can't upgrade it later, max the RAM out. At least 32 gigs would be great, and get a solid state drive. Again, I don't know. Can you replace hard drives outside of? They've been so weird about all that. But so get a hard drive that you can replace, or solid state drive, and if you have to upgrade with them, do it. 100% worth it every single time. The solid state drive is a gigantic performance boost. CPU, I always go, they usually have a jump, right? The CPU is like a jump that is a jump, and then there's a super expensive jump. And I never do the super expensive jump. So like when we bought this 2012. I think it was an $850 jump between like the top of the line and the next one down. So not even a chance. So that's kind of my thing. Typically, it's second to best CPU, solid state drive, and a lot of RAM. Although this one, I didn't pay Apple for almost any of that outside of the CPU because it was exorbitantly expensive. But again, I don't really know if if Apple even lets you do that anymore. Someone else here might know. Seinfeld, a show about nothing. Yeah, a plan without a plan. I know, right? I'm full of isms like that. All right, do you use Max for Live to help you out in Ableton? I don't use a lot of Max for Live. There's some cool stuff. When I'm teaching with Ableton, sometimes I'll pull out like the oscilloscope or a spectrum analyzer, and there's some cool stuff. Isotonic really has some interesting things you can do with it. You can do, and I'm sure there's other really cool Max for Live stuff, but I haven't gotten heavy into it. 8 megs of RAM. Sure, I jump up to 16 at least, but 8's I jump up to 16 if you're gonna do tracks at all. How do you mix your in-ears for performing live? That's a great question. When I perform live and for in-ears, what I like to do is really simply I try to get a band mix. Pretend so scratch keys and scratch vocals. So get a band mix with drums, bass, guitars that feels like a record, and because you want to be able to hear everyone, you need to hear everyone. Like that's crucial. And I should have said that in this workshop actually, that you need to have an in-ear mix that lets you hear everyone so you can feel what's going on. But the you want to have a mix that's rocking, feels like an album. And then what I do is I mix the keys in a little bit on top because I want to be able to hear what I'm playing. So definitely louder than you'd hear on an album, but not crazy loud. And then I mix the vocals just loud enough to hear them. I like to be able to turn it up super loud without hating myself. And whenever the vocals are super loud, it doesn't matter if they're the best singer in the world, they're going to tear your eardrums apart if you turn it up loud. So I keep them just barely above so I can hear what they're singing, what they're doing, and that's it. Guitars are panned visually. This is what's interesting. I don't pan them based upon rhythm or lead. I pan them based upon where they're at on stage, and they're the only thing I do that with. So whoever's here is left. Whoever's here is right. So that if I hear something like bing, I want to look at it. I want to be able to feel like I can look at it. And so I keep that up. Do I use a USB hub? Not at the moment. I did, and sometimes it works fine, and sometimes it works horribly. The best luck I had has been with a weird tiny little USB like expander thing. It looks like a flash drive, little dongle, but it just doesn't do anything other than it just puts ports it basically goes over your network port, right? That one was probably the most reliable setup I've had as far as USB goes. I would caution you from getting way too many USB devices. It's a fast way to get a serious weird issue and in-out problems. Plug your audio interface if you're going USB into the front port on your Mac. The front port gets the priority of the power, and so it'll be the one to do. Place to see my whole equipment list. I have some stuff on my site. I think it might be up to date-ish. I need to update it though. Sorry, Jacob. All right, this is it. I'm out of here. I got to figure out how to make this office look like less of a white box. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for tuning in the workshop and hanging out, asking questions. I'll leave that Facebook group up for a little bit anyway. Feel free to ask anything that comes up. Chat, hang out. Depending upon activity level, we'll get rid of it eventually probably. A recording will be coming out soon along with a worksheet. And I think that's it. Thanks a lot. All right. Once I find the stop button, I'm going to be gone.